What's going on, everyone? So in this video, we're going to take a look at the ARCA-SWISS C1 geared head. So when I first got the head, you look at it and it looks like this board cube, you know, and you're trying to figure out, all right, where's the front of it, where's the back of it? Easiest way to remember it is you got these two levels right here. This is the back of it, and then this over here is going to be the front of it. So this is the surface that you're going to be looking at when you're working with the tripod head. If we start down below here, there is a knob right down here, which is going to be the overall panning base. I should say the lower panning base, because it also is a panning base up top. All you have to do is just turn this knob here and lock it down. It's probably important to be careful not to tighten that too much, because it doesn't really take a lot in order to tighten it down. Then we have a series of knobs. There's two knobs on this side, one knob on this side, and then the back and the front both have a knob there. You also have some friction control knobs. And then this right here is the adjustment for the main panning base up top. So if I lock this down here, I'll show you kind of what some of this stuff does. So first we'll start with this guy right here. So if I were to loosen this knob, now the whole thing is going to hinge open like that. So I'll let you guys see that mechanism as it moves. So what happens is that when you turn this down, these two pieces right here tighten up against these little dovetails here, and it's going to lock this head in place. So very, very solid, kind of hinges outward there like that. And you do have some indicators here showing you 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 45, and 60 degrees. And also worth mentioning, it does actually extend a little bit past 60 degrees, just like that. So this gets to be useful when shooting stuff like I like to shoot the intimate landscape photos where I'm angling the camera downward. So this gives sort of the crude adjustment, and then you can fine tune it with the geared adjustments in addition to that. And so I'm going to actually go ahead and lower this guy back down in place, just like that. Now I'm going to show you, so spin this back around here, the geared adjustments. So we have this knob here, and on the opposite side, you have the knob right over here. These are the ones that you're going to use to adjust this motion right here. And I'll spin it around this way because there's a friction control knob also I want you guys to see here. But if I have the friction dialed to the negative side right now, as I turn this knob, actually both knobs at the same time, you see that the tripod head there starts to move. And it takes a little bit of work to turn it when you don't have anything on there, but when you actually have the weight of the camera on there, it'll actually work a lot more smoothly. And there is no need when you don't have anything on there to dial the friction up, but you'll find that as soon as you put a load on there, that is where that comes in handy. Now that was one of the questions I had on this head with regard to the fact that there's no way of actually fully locking it down. And so I wondered, how is that going to be if you have a big camera on there and the camera's kind of pulling on one side or the other, and can it actually move the head when you don't want it to? And the answer is yes. So if you have this dialed all the way to the negative side for the friction, and you have a camera on there and you try to pull down on that, it will be able to move it. But if you were to lock down the friction control knob to the positive side, then it's going to have enough friction where it will not be able to overcome that. And I find that on my camera, when I put it on there, I do need to dial the friction there, and then it's as good as locked down as soon as you have it set to where you want it to be. And so if I spin this back around here, now you'll see that I have the knob right on the back, and there's also a facing knob on the front. So this is how you're going to kind of level it from side to side, just like that, and then just like that. So we can use those controls in combination with each other. So if I do want to be able to shoot something including something straight down, if I loosen this knob here to pivot it forward, lock that in place there, and then I can actually take this guy right here and angle it all the way like that. So you can see I'm actually even beyond 90 degrees straight down. So pretty clever design. It's a very solid design. And as I said earlier, as soon as you have these friction knobs dialed to the positive side, even with a very large setup on there, it's not going to move on its own. And I have already tested that with the large camera. Now let's take a look at the top platform here. So on the very front of it, you're gonna have a little knob right here, and this is what's gonna loosen the top panning base. So if you wanted to, you could use this as a panorama head. You basically will use the geared movements to level a top platform, and then now that you're level up here, now you can pan from side to side. And you do have some markings here as far as degrees there, so you can kind of keep track of where you're moving there. So really, really simple. And the one thing I will say is that this is definitely a head that is not going to be on my tripod as I'm hiking around, because I don't want this to get banged into rocks. So it's really important, I think, to put a wrap on it to really keep it very well protected. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a camera on there. I'm going to put ARCA-SWISS camera. That way you can kind of see how this performs with the weight of the camera and how everything balances in that regard. So I went ahead and put my ARCA-SWISS F-Line 8x10 camera on top of the Cube head. And on the camera I do have a Nikon W 300mm 5.6 lens, which is a really heavy lens. And this is a setup that I commonly use. I really like using the normal lens here. And this will be a pretty good test as far as how the Cube head is going to stack up as soon as you have a pretty heavy load on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the various movements of the head with the camera on it. That way you can kind of see real world how it works, and also how important it is to have the friction control set. So let's start with the lower panning base, which is the knob right back here. And so with that loose, you can see it is pretty easy to spin around. Not quite as smooth as a fluid video head, but honestly not too far from it. So if I lock that down and I loosen the top panning base, you can see how just the camera up top spins. And again, that is pretty darn smooth. So not quite as smooth as a video head, but it has kind of that nice resistance where at a pinch, honestly, you could probably use it as one. Now we look at the other controls. So I'm going to spin this around so I can see this a little bit better from my angle. So first we're going to start with the up and down geared motion. And I do have a friction knob that I'm going to leave all the way on the negative side, which is not how I'd use this, but I just want to show you the amount of weight it takes in order to move this setup. So with that set, at the zeroed out position, I'm not able to pull down on the camera. But as I angle this a little bit more here, I'm at 15 degrees. I can't adjust it. And then if I go to about 20 degrees, I'm getting close to being able to. 25 degrees, then I actually am able to move it. So basically you need to have a base friction set in order to avoid that. So if I rack this back to the 0 setting, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the friction knob all the way to the positive side, which is how I'd want to use it with this setup. Now, if I go ahead and lock this in place, and same thing, I am going to adjust this here where I'm angling downward. That's at 10 degrees. That's rock solid. We are at 15 degrees, solid. 20 degrees, we got iffy before, still solid. 25, it's not budging. And all the way down to 30, it won't be able to budge there because it does reach the end point. So it is very important as you put a heavy load on this to remember to dial down that friction adjustment. It does mean you have to work a little harder to adjust it as you're moving it, but it does keep it really solid all the way through. The next adjustment is going to be the sort of the leveling adjustment, which is the knob on the front and on the back, right there and right there. And you'll see that on the back of the head there is also a friction adjustment right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and adjust that friction adjustment to the negative side there. So there's no friction adjustment. It's super easy to adjust this, and I'd actually say it's probably too easy. That's another one where I like to leave that set all the way to the positive side. So again, it's right there. You basically just adjust that all the way to the positive side. And then once you do that, it does take a little more effort to turn it, but honestly, that feels a lot better because before it was almost moving a little bit too easily. And then the final adjustment, and this is the one that gets to be a little bit more awkward, is when you adjust to basically let it hinge forward. And because it's not geared, so it's just going to kind of move on its own. So I'm going to simply just kind of help guide it down there, and then I can lock this down, and it is going to be really solid by doing that. You have to be careful of center of gravity so the whole thing doesn't just tip over. And then likewise, I'm going to loosen that, then bring this guy back down right there. So there you have it. ARCA-SWISS Cube is a really solid setup. It's just fine that it doesn't have anything to fully lock it down because those friction control knobs are very important. But this is what makes it a lot easier when you're setting up a very precise composition, because you can dial it in one way or the other, and especially when you combine that with what this camera is able to do. I'll do a separate video on this camera a little bit later. But thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you around next time.